right, so welcome back to her, and I'm him. Oh, we're so excited for 2023, and 2022 was actually an amazing ride. We had some high highs and some interesting lows, but we're still here. And so we're excited to share with you some of the things that we've learned and how we're growing. And we're just here to encourage you to keep going and growing as well.
It was pretty fast, 2022. I mean, like it started on the roll and it kept going.
To say the least.
Yeah.
But as we said before, we are going to be a little more intentional this year. And what we decided was we are going to dedicate each month to tackling a specific topic that has to do with how to develop an effective relationship, a relationship that you actually enjoy and you want to be in, right? Whether you are a person who is single and looking to become involved in a relationship, whether you are already in a relationship, or maybe you just got out of a relationship and you're trying to figure out what went wrong. Well, hopefully something that we say will help you to be able to move forward and to have some success in relationships. And so for this month, the month of January, we're going to be focusing on communication and what effective communication looks like in a relationship. We found an article, it was called 12 Elements of a Healthy Relationship. And the first element, as we just said, was effective communication. And I'm going to read a little bit from the article so that you have an idea of where we're going. So in this article, it was written by what's her name? Molly Hutchison. She's a health education specialist, and also Alyssa Campbell, who is a gender violence prevention and education coordinator. Ooh, those titles are interesting, right? But they wrote an article, and we'll attach the link to the article in case you all want to go and check it out on your own. But the first element was communication, and this is what they had to say about communication. Communication, the way you talk with friends or partners, is an important part of a relationship. Everyone involved should be able to communicate feelings, opinions, and beliefs. When communicating, consider the tone and phrasing. Miscommunication often occurs when individuals choose to text versus talking in person or on a phone call. Figuring out the best ways to express your feelings together will help eliminate miscommunication. So the first thing that we're going to jump into is talking about communicating with friends. Now, we know that there are common friends that we have in common, people that, may have known one of us longer or what have you, but together they know us as a couple as well. Then we also have friends who are separate friends. There are people who I know that have not been introduced to him yet, and vice versa. And so what are the conversations that are appropriate with friends? That's kind of what we want to dive into first of all. And so from your perspective, what do you think are the conversations that are appropriate to have with friends?
So, I think that appropriate conversations, to have among friends should be open communication, right? And I think with guy talk is kind of tricky because guys need to know how to talk around your wife, and at the same time, guys need to be themselves. So, in the African American community, in the Black community, we call it code switching. So you're an expert at code switching because certain things don't need to be talked around women, wives, girlfriends, so on and so forth. So one of the things that, my guys would always ask me is, hey, is your girl around? And I would say to them, you know what? I know that this conversation revolves around not having my girl around. And so I would ask my girl to either leave the room, leave the car, or we'll have the conversation later. And in most cases, we'll have the conversation later when I can have all ears on tap and be able to listen to what they're trying to say. In saying that, I also know that if you can't sit around my girl, then maybe I don't need to hear it.
Something to that. I'm just saying, yeah.
Now, because she's going to hear it regardless if I'm open communication. We're talking about communication. Well, your wife should know everything.
Well, I don't know about that because I feel like there are certain relationships that are relationships between you two people, and especially if it's a friend that you've like grown up with and you've known forever. So, for example, me and my best friend, we talk about things that are near and dear to us, right?
Mhm.
And sometimes we're going through different things. She may be going through something, and if she shares something with me in confidence, I don't feel like I need to come back to you and share it. You know what I'm saying? So
That's true.
there are certain things that are just part of that relationship, and they should not flow into your dating or marriage relationship.
Right. And
So,
I get that. And what I was getting at is that, your significant other, your wife, your partner, whoever it may be, should know everything that's important about you.
I
Now-
agree
Now,
to it. Well, so this is my thing though, because something that I've noticed in previous relationships is sometimes people have conversations with outside friends,
Mhm.
and those conversations affect them, right?
Mhm.
So, somebody tells you something and it makes you sad, or they tell you something and it makes you mad. Now
Mhm.
you come to me and you're carrying that emotion with you, and I don't know why.
Right.
And so in those instances, I feel like it's important to make sure that you're communicating with your partner, with your friend, whoever you're, around, so that they understand the emotion and they're not caught off guard by it. They don't feel like what's wrong with him, or why is he taking this out on me, vice versa, her too. Because sometimes ladies, we come home and have attitudes about stuff that has happened outside of the house, and we bring it home to our partner, our spouse, and they're like, why are you mad all the time? I ain't did nothing to you. Little do they know, it's because you and your girl's been having these conversations and you come home with all that on you, and now he has to be the take the brunt of that, and that's not fair.
I mean, married couples is great. It's good to be married, but you don't want to talk to your single friends all the time if you're married, because then they only see one side of it, the single side, and they'll tell you that you shouldn't be married. So they throw a negative shade on you. And I think that it's important to understand that every situation is different. I don't talk to my single friend. As a matter of fact, I don't talk to anybody about three things: sex, money, and who's right. You know what? Those things are not important to me in life. And I tell my wife the same thing. I don't talk to people about that, because that isn't something that they want to hear about. Like, no one wants to hear about your sex life. No one wants to hear
I
about
wouldn't say no one, but it ain't their business.
it.
That's the
Ain't
bottom line.
and so exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So getting we talked about, the best friends and the business partners, whatever. But what about friends of the opposite sex? What do you think about, men who have women friends that are not, that don't know the wife, or, maybe they do know the wife, I don't know, or women who have male friends outside of their relationship, or vice versa.
Tricky. That's a tricky one, because, you know, guys are wolves. Okay. Let's be clear to the audience out there. Guys are wolves, and wolves eat everybody but their own. And if they're fighting the den, they're going to eat their own. At the same time, I think that women are wolves too, just a different type of wolf. So emotionally, they might get a hold of you and take you on. So as a person that's had, very good relationships, students, colleagues, peers with the opposite sex, I would be very cautious about, how I proceed forward being married now.
I have lots of good friends who are male, right? And what I've come to establish is that boundary of, if you have a problem with being my friend and respecting the fact that I'm married, then I can't be your friend no more. So, there are some guys who will call at inappropriate hours, or they'll call and say, hey, you want to go have lunch? Knowing that, no, I'm hanging out with my husband today. And, you tell them that, and it's like, oh, you always doing something with yeah. So, at that point, if they can't respect the fact that I'm married, that my priority is my husband, then they can't be my friend. And that's just the end of that.
Do they ever invite me?
That's the problem. That's what I'm telling you.
They don't.
Now, the ones who say, hey, do you and your husband want to join me for lunch? Or do you both want to come to this event? Then, oh yeah, cool. And we're fine. Or, when they call and say Happy New Year, Happy Holidays, whatever they say, and make sure you tell your husband too. Okay. Oh yeah, we all good. Well, this is my point. Every relationship is not a sexual relationship. I actually have male platonic friends.
Right.
Now, maybe they think I'm cute. Maybe they wanted something at one point in time, but it never happened. And my thing is if it was going to happen, it would have happened. And so since it has not happened and we're at a place where, you know, we realize it ain't happened yet, it ain't gonna happen, but we can still be cordial, still have fun together. I don't have a problem with that. I don't know.
And that's the point that is very important, right? Because I have female friends that are platonic. Nothing would ever happen. Nothing has happened. They either married, got a boyfriend, whatever. The timing was bad. And all that to say that it's important that the communication is wide open, right? Because my wife know about you. You know, my wife is going to be included in anything we're doing together. You know, and if we did want to do something together, like together, my wife will be right there with me. So you already know.
I don't know about that, but
Yes,
that's hilarious.
You hold this back.
I don't want to watch. No. Anyway, that's a whole nother stuff. Okay, so then along those lines, what about communication with exes?
I think it's important that, you know, all relationships end on a good note. They don't, listen, everybody ain't supposed to be married for 50, 60 years, okay? Everybody ain't supposed to be together for 50, 60 years. So it does happen. Breakups happen. Relationships move forward. You know, seasons move forward. It's important though. But you can still talk. There was a reason you laid down and you was in a relationship, right? So you can still talk. A lot of people that don't talk or, you know, feel like something sinister happened in the relationship, no, it just ended. It just ended.
Well, no, there are some relationships that did not end well. And in that case, you know, if it's somebody who has really caused you all that pain and strife or whatever, then sometimes a cut is needed. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
There's no need to maintain any communication because you were not good for me. In
But
fact,
would
you
you
brought me
speak
down.
in public?
Maybe. I mean, sometimes,
Okay.
you know, there have been times where I've seen an ex and, you know, I noticed that they were there and I kept moving, didn't stop and speak. Because I didn't want to go out of my way to say nothing. That's just what it was. But there are others who, you know, it ended amicably. We're still friends, and you know, occasionally might text and say, "How you doing? How are your kids?" or whatever. And you know, they're watching my stories. My child is also, you know, somebody who they've made a relationship with, so they care and they ask. And it is what it is. But you know, I think it gets back to that idea of just the level of respect that you have. You know, it's like you respect the person still. You can be friendly, but you understand that there's a boundary that you don't have that same relationship anymore. And so don't pass that on.
And I agree with all of that. And I also wanted to say, like, even with ex-wives or ex-husbands, you know, there's a fine line of balance because, you know, when you've made that type of commitment, you know, things are, you know, things to be rekindled. I remember like my ex-wife, her mama and her mama's daddy, you know, every Christmas they would get together. I mean, like, God damn, like really? So they understood each other. They knew that they couldn't be together, but every Christmas they would get together. It's like something happened, you know, in that relationship where those memories were rekindled during Christmas. All that to say, I think it's important to not you know, have that part of the relationship rekindled. I think it's very dangerous because we, as men, we you know, it's sport. Like it's wolves. It's, you know, we got more sperm than you got eggs. And so it's one of those scenarios where we can just do it and it's not matter. But women, it's always emotional. It's always an attachment. It's always DNA. And
I'm gonna stop you right there because it's not always.
Well,
now, more likely, yes, but not always. There are some women out there who just, you know, they like, I'm over it, but I need to get mine.
They're like men.
I mean, you know, unfortunately, we have picked up some of y'all bad habits. I'm gonna say that.
You should be able to be mature, be an adult, be out of high school to where if that happens, you know, as you see somebody out, or you know, have to call each other on the phone, things of that nature, where you got to share a kid, it shouldn't disturb the relationship that you're in. Even if something is happening, like women's intuition is tough. Like it can figure it out. So don't think you just pulling the rug over somebody's eyes, guys, or when they, the intuition is tough.
All right, so we've kind of talked about friends and past relationships, but what about communication with family? So, for example, my mom and dad are, a very intimate part of my life, and I speak to them regularly. Are there boundaries with respect to the things that are appropriate to share with parents about your relationship?
I think there are. I think that some things just don't need to be said.
Like what?
I mean, it can be anything, but let's start with sex.
You know what? I have friends that will be talking to their mamas about their sex life. And I'm like, really? Y'all do that? Where they do that at? But yeah, someone really free that way.
Yeah, I don't think that sex needs to be discussed with the parents, because at the end of the day, they know you're doing it. They know you're having it. And if you aren't having it, that problem doesn't need to be with the parents anyway. It needs to be with somebody else, because there's some blockage there. With that being said, there's other conversations that are off limits to parents, but I think a lot of people, that if they have close relationships with their parents, you need to keep them. I think it's important as a significant other, you need to respect it, because that is why you love that person. They have relationships that are everlasting, and come on, the parents, they have the kids, so they gotta have a better relationship than you. Well, I won't say better, but they gotta have a relationship with their parents, because it's important. I mean, like, that's who they supposed to take care of now that they're grown.
Well, you know what, I've heard the saying that a lot of women will watch how a man interacts with his mother, because they say the way that a person interacts with their parent is how they're going to treat you. So vice versa. A lot of men will see how does the woman interact with her father to figure out what kind of wife she's going to be. And it's interesting though, because I remember my first marriage, my husband actually went and spoke to my father to ask him about, me and, permission to marry me and all that kind of stuff. But what was funny about that was, at that time, my father and I did not have a good relationship. And so my father gave him his perspective of me, but my ex-husband didn't have the whole context of that. And so he ended up forming this opinion of me based on what my father said. And, my father supposedly knows me the best, blah, 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 blah. But there were some other things happening that shaped that relationship, and he didn't have that full context. So there's some truth.
Did he get a good review of you?
I mean, he married me, so okay. I mean, it is what it is. But we ain't together no more, so that's a whole nother thing. But anyway, the bottom line is, yes, that relationship is important. But if you expect this relationship to be maintained, there have to be boundaries.
You know what's so crazy, and this is kind of off kilter, but I'll say it anyway. I love your relationship you have with your parents, and it makes me have a better relationship, because initially I was kind of, I don't know, like as far as your mom is concerned, that's your mom, but your dad, I was kind of like, wondering, how close the relationship is. And your dad came up to me, he said this, and this is in confidence, but I'll say it to the world. He said, use me however you want to. And I said, well, damn, thank you. You my new dad now. I will use you, because my dad passed away, and I thought, well, her dad is a perfect dad. Like, to me, he's a man that has principles and values and knows a lot and is smart, and he's done a good job, with what he's with the cards that he's been dealt in life, and just in general, he's a good dad. And so I thought, well, this is now my dad, and whatever my wife needs, I'm gonna make sure she's got it. But if not, her daddy, will make sure she got it.
That is very true. And on the same lines, I want to give you some flowers also, because just watching how you've taken care of your mother over this last year has been really amazing. And I know that your relationship with her has not always been the best relationship, but in spite of it, she's still your mother, and you still respect her as such.
That's
and
right.
So I appreciate that. It's funny, because even when you're not feeling well, you're always thinking about how can you go over to help her. And I just really admire that about you.
I think it's important, because, now's the time where I take care of my mom. And, that's a job that I don't take lightly.
Yeah.
Shit. It's part of being a good son is to take care of your parents when they had a year of cleaning my shit.
You're so stupid.
Throwing away my diaper, watching me be a bad kid. Shit, I can at least return the favor. And I think that it's important that if you don't have a relationship with your parents, you clean that communication up. Like before it's too late. And a lot of times we miss the opportunity. But I'm here to say it now, it's worth it. It's worth it because you need your parents.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so we talked about parents. What about communicating with your children? We both have sons, right?
Yeah.
And so first of all, you communicating with your own child about things that are happening in your relationship. And then also communicating with a stepchild, because this child is now the child that has been grafted into your family through marriage, but they aren't your blood.
Right.
So how do you deal with that? Because I know, for instance, this idea of disciplining a stepchild, what that looks like. It's like, you ain't my daddy, but I am your daddy. So what do you think about that?
So I had, the best of both worlds, and I was able to kind of understand that communicating with my child, versus a stepchild is very different, but not really. It's kind of the same, but you have to have the respect first on both sides, and it's important to know that as a man, the him side of things, respect is earned; it's not given. So if I earned it, then okay, great. Now, as far as communicating with my kid, one of the things that I had to learn was that, being a teacher, being someone that talks to people all the time, that I had to, use that same motivation with them that I did, with my kid. And so that motivation isn't always do as I say, not as I do, but it's like, okay, son, you see the way I did it. Okay, you can do it, any multiple different ways, but do it. Like, get it done. I don't care how it gets done, just get it done. And so I would tell my kid, you clean your room, you do this, you do that, things are rewarded. And saying that doesn't work with your kids.
Every child is different. Yeah.
Every child is different. He is not motivated by that. And I've known this kid for a while, because our boys grew up together. And so I said, well, damn, this is a different type of communication that I got to do with this guy. And he's smart. So, what I did is I did what every man should do. All right. Let the mama deal with it.
Is that what y'all should do?
Every man should do that. Know when you've been licked and beating on the child and telling the child what to do, it doesn't work. You let the mama deal with it. She's been dealing with it for this long. And then, eventually, if you have a relationship with the kid, you can come back later and say, you know what? I tried to tell you, but this is what happened. You wasn't listening. You had a hard head, or I wasn't communicating well. Whatever the case may be, you tell them later. Direct communication is definitely the way to go. I had to learn that I wasn't communicating directly, and my wife taught me how to communicate directly.
We still learning.
No, we still learning, but you told me, hey man, when you want things, just ask for them. Like, don't beat around the bush. Don't be that kind of guy, the innuendo. No, just ask for it and then see what happens. If I want to do it, then great, no problem. If I don't want to do it, great, no problem.
You are hilarious. But speaking about the kids, though, so I was just thinking about the relationship that I have with your son, right? And it's very interesting because I do almost feel like it's that student-teacher type of relationship. I treat him as I would treat my students. It's funny you should say that. And, I'll show them different things and help them do different things. But at the end of the day,
I don't want it to lose.
Oh, it's fine, baby.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
Yeah. So anyhow, I'll show them different things. I'll help him do different things. But at the end of the day, it's his decision on if he wants to follow through or not, right? Just even thinking about, both of our sons have graduated from high school now, and both of them are trying to figure out, okay, now what do I do as adults, right? And so his son is into art, and so I helped him to research some different art schools and different things, and figure out what's the process of creating the portfolios and all of that. And we went through that together. And at the end of the day, he didn't follow through with it. And so, I could have been the overbearing parent who, made him do it, but I was like, no, that's not my role, because I'm the stepmom. And at the end of the day, his biological mother is the one who is taking that active role of pushing him and moving him forward. And so I had to step back a little bit and say, okay, do it the other way. And, when he comes to me and asks for my help and for my opinion about things, I give it. But when he doesn't, I have to kind of just, sit back and just love him.
And so in thinking about my son, he'll be 20 this year. This is the year that he'll be 20. And so I'm thinking, golly, like I gotta make sure this boy, has his feet underneath him and that he's well grounded, because it's about to start happening. As Black men, we know certain ages, certain demographics, things start happening faster. And so, I'm wishing that he will understand that this time is not promised, and that he gets on the case and starts getting to what he wants to see in life. But I appreciate you sitting with him, because it's something that you have inside of you that I don't have. I don't have the women gene. I don't have the femininity stuff that some guys have. So I try to put my son in a position of success, but at the end of the day, like, he does need that side of him. He needs both sides.
Yeah. All right. So we've talked about communicating with parents. We've talked about communicating with our children. What about communicating with extended family? So, for example, my favorite cousin, she and I will get on the phone to talk about all kinds of stuff, right? Or, I have nieces and nephews and other cousins and aunts and uncles and all of that kind of thing. And so what do you say about communicating with extended family? What types of conversations are appropriate?
For example, extended family, cousins, so on and so forth. You be yourself. Like, no communication is offensive if you're yourself. Like, it's the way you are. It's just who you are. Now, you can tailor it back. You can tone it down. You can bring it in. But if that's the way you are, that's the way you are. And no one should change that. Like, that is one of those things that you say to yourself.
So can I go tell my cousin about what we did last night in the bedroom?
You could.
Is that appropriate is my question.
It's not necessarily appropriate, because if you don't tell your parents, you don't tell your cousin. But at the end of the day, if you did tell your cousin that, you know what, I was fulfilled or unfulfilled, or we did this, we did that, you know what, I'm not gonna knock it. Like, that's just what it is. I mean, it gets to a maturity level at that point.
I was just about to say that, because honestly, I feel like many people are not mature enough to handle that. And then it comes out at an inappropriate time or in an appropriate way.
Yeah.
And so I feel like certain conversations shouldn't be had. I don't want you telling your cousins what we did in the bedroom. I'm just being frank about
it. I don't tell my cousins what I do in the bedroom. Now, when we were boyfriend and girlfriend, maybe a couple of times.
See? And then they looking at me all funny the next time they see me.
They don't see. No. They don't look at you funny. They look at you special. Like,
see, and that's the uncomfortableness that I'm talking about. People don't need to know all of that about me unless they in a relationship with me. That's what I'm saying.
Listen, I don't talk much, but every now and again, I'll run my mouth if I like what I like. And I like what I like. Hey.
Yeah, so anyhow, what I'm telling you though is the reason why I don't prefer that is because things come out in inappropriate ways sometimes, So say, for instance, you told your cousin something, and then for whatever reason, me and your cousin get into an argument, he gonna, use that against me. Or sometimes people will use things like that against you. You know what I'm saying?
So people that use things like truth against someone, that means they're hiding lies. And I think that it's important to understand that, you don't use the truth against somebody. Listen, that is what it is. Okay, you can't handle it, so be it. But you don't use that against me. Now, if communicating lies against somebody is what you think is good, that's bad.
Okay, so what about, for example, when people share their arguments? You know, we got into a fight, you need somebody to talk to, so you go and air it out with a family member, and all of a sudden, you think that's bad, you said?
I think that's bad.
Okay,
because the maturity level then becomes back into play. So, for example, you know, I don't know why I get this, but I used to get it a lot more than I get it now. But people will come up to me and tell me, you know, everything about them, and I don't even know this person. I'm like, what is going on here? In saying that, I understand why I get that, because I am trusting. I do have a look amongst my face that shows that I can
look amongst your face.
I don't know if I said that right. I probably didn't, but I have a look amongst about me that says, "Hey, you know what? I can trust him with some important information," and you can, because I don't run my mouth. But at the end of the day, like, if someone is, you know, telling an argument because they want somebody's opinion, first off, that opinion don't matter.
Bottom line.
That opinion, nothing matters unless you make it matter. And so people nowadays, you know, have social media and they put things on social media. It's like, that isn't what social media is for. Well, you don't need to solidify somebody else's opinion.
They're soliciting support, right? They want somebody to be on their side so that they can feel like they're right?
And so that's the maturity factor. Hey, listen, man, if you got into an argument, if you got into a scenario, it's okay. Life happens, but like somebody else's scenario, that ain't my place. I don't care about it. It's not that I, don't care, but I don't care about it. And so I just kind of keep it moving. And, I would hope that mature individuals will keep it moving too, because it doesn't matter.
All right. So we've kind of talked about who we feel is appropriate to talk to and what types of conversations we feel are appropriate to have with those individuals. In this next question, I'd like to know about how we communicate, and is how the way we communicate important. So for example, when I say how, I mean, like, for instance, tone. If you're speaking in a loud voice all the time, or if you're always gesturing and clapping and all of that kind of stuff, or if you are the way you say things, the way you phrase the words, it makes a difference, right? What comes to your mind when I ask that?
So what comes to mind is that, when I'm excited or when things aren't going my way, I get a loud tone. And that loud tone it's not taken well. And, I'll just say it this way. I don't have a loud tone in class. I don't have a loud tone when working. So I shouldn't have a loud tone when talking to my wife. But at the end of the day, sometimes I get a little bit excited, and the tone changes. Now, in saying that, I think the best way to deal with it is understanding that if my tone is not what it's supposed to be, and my wife tells me, I don't get mad at her, because one of the things that I know is that I got a weak argument, and so I'm arguing, right? The argument's weak. If you got a strong argument, you ain't arguing, right? You talking, you explaining, you dealing with it as it comes, but you're not arguing because your argument's strong. And so I had to figure out when I got a weak argument, my tone changes. Now, the other side of that question is when I'm alone. How do I talk to myself? Because I think that's important too. Like, how we communicate with ourselves is just as important how we communicate with others, because we forget that we speak it into existence, and that some of the things that we say to the world, to the universe by ourselves, is some of the things we would say, openly. If you don't communicate openly, like if everything's closed and behind closed doors, hey man, good luck. Good luck getting what you want to get in life, because you have to open up and communicate, whether it's to your God, to your whatever you pray to, and to whoever you talk to. It has to be open, because everybody has to see it. It has to be heard. It has to be felt. It has to be open.
Interesting. So with respect to that tone thing, I know that I too am guilty of having a certain tone sometimes when I don't get my way or when I don't feel heard. And I appreciate the fact that we can tell each other, hey, I don't like that tone right now, you know, and we both are not too, what's the word? You know,
too prideful to
there you
understand
go.
it.
We're not too prideful to
ego
stop.
driven.
Exactly. You know, when you let me know, I'm like, all right, babe. Okay, this is what I was trying to say, you know, and I try to say it a different way. Same thing with you. And so I appreciate the fact that we've gotten to the point where we have that freedom and we have that ability to speak to each other and, you know.
But think about that point, right? Because that's an important point.
Yeah.
That's a her and him point. Like, you know, we're up in age, so like we're middle aged, so we don't have the young problems, but like we don't have the old problems either. And I think that it's important that people understand where they're at in the relationship, because you have to get past certain things quicker than not. If it festers on and it lingers, like, come on, why are we talking about this still? This doesn't matter. Like, do I love you?
Well, that's the thing too. You know, at the end of the day, you have to figure out, is this argument worth having at the end of the day? Because most of them aren't.
We know that.
All right, so we've been talking about face-to-face conversations and how they may escalate sometimes. And I'm wondering, in your opinion, is there a most effective way to communicate? So for example, texting versus talking in person versus maybe calling someone on the phone. The reason why I ask this is because I've had a couple of conversations lately where they began as texting conversations. One was on the phone, one was texting via Facebook. And in both of those cases, I had a question for the person that I was talking to, but along with my question, I also inserted how I felt about it. And they didn't take it well. Because they said, why do you feel this way when you don't have all the information? You should have just called me to talk to me to get the information. And from my perspective, I felt like I had all the information. You know, there was one situation that was cut dry. We were standing in the same room together. We heard the same thing said, but we interpreted it differently because we had different information. And because I did not stop in that moment to figure out what was going on, I let it fester. And then later on tried to text about it. And the person said, well, this is what you didn't know about that conversation. And so no, what you thought was not correct. And my question was, well, how come you didn't say nothing in that moment? But, you know, that was a whole nother thing. With the other one, same thing. You know, the person told me, well, I thought I told you everything you needed to know. And I said, well, I don't agree with you. I felt like I needed to know more, but you know, you did what you did and it is what it is. But in both of those conversations, there was something was missing in translation because there was texting and not the ability to ask a follow-up question or to hear the tone of the voice of how it was said or whatever it was.
So I'll interject my male side of things, and I would say that it's better to speak to someone face to face, right? Phone, texting, you know, replying, all of that stuff gets messed up when you can't see those eyes. And even, you know, though the eyes may lie, you can say to yourself, I spoke to the person face to face and here's the way I feel about it. I didn't leave nothing on the table. Now, in saying that, I was, and listening to your story, I will say this. One of the things I do is when I'm thinking or feeling a certain way, I like to talk to the person, because texting and you know direct message, none of that gets out what I really want to say. And now if something that I feel strongly about, I'm gonna say it all, because at the end of the day, if this is the end of the relationship, then I said it all. Like, I didn't leave nothing on the line. I said it all.
All right. Now, something that is been thrown into the conversation as of late is this idea of video chatting, FaceTime, that type of thing, right? Now, I've had friends who use FaceTime as a control mechanism. And what I mean by that is this. They wanted to know where a person was. And so rather than saying, where are you, or call them and say, hey, what you up to, they would FaceTime so they could see the environment.
You know, I don't necessarily think that's an invasive bad thing, But at the
That's
end
a
of
control mechanism, though. If I'm out somewhere and I don't want you to know where I am, or why don't you just trust where I say I am?
well, the
You know
other
what I'm
side of it
saying?
is what he got to hide. So, it's kind of tricky. I mean, it is kind of tricky. I don't mind FaceTiming, but end of the day, I really don't like it. And I'm glad I'm not bound by a FaceTime relationship because, at the end of the day, I might be smoking a stick. I might be on the boulevard. Who knows where I am? I might be in class. So, the reality is that I think FaceTiming is tough for someone that ain't busy. When you busy, man, FaceTiming is like, okay, I'm busy. And if it's your kids, that's different. But even the kids gotta understand when you're busy. Shit, you ain't got time to FaceTime. Shit, FaceTiming is new invention. That isn't an old invention. That's a new invention, new technology. Shit. Matter of fact, when the FaceTime first was developed, I was like, FaceTime, they get to look at me and talk.
Right? Like, wait a minute.
I ain't trying to be looking at nobody talking. Shit,
That's hilarious.
yeah. But at the end of the day, say what it is you mean. Direct communication wins. Like, you'd be surprised like how, people don't want to hear some fluff and some BS. They don't. So say what it is you mean. Politicians, people that are in the ministry, they have a hard time saying what it is they mean. But if they say what they mean and they do what they say, word is bond. Like, communication works.
Just thinking about in a relationship, something that has helped me is just always remembering we're on the same team.
Yeah.
And filtering what I hear through that lens. It's like, if you're telling me something, I know that you're telling me because you want things to be better. You're not telling me to put me down. You're not telling me whatever you're saying to make me feel bad. You're saying it because you want things to be better. And if I remember that, then it's not offensive to hear what you may have to say that may be a criticism or whatever, right? It's just because we're on the same team, we're trying to get better. And so always keep that in the back of the mind. I took some notes earlier when we were talking about it, and something else that you said that really stuck out to me was you said to receive it from the other person's perspective. Excuse me. Yep. Receive it from the other person's perspective before you respond. And so would you elaborate on that a little bit?
So what that means is, like, I'm one to put my foot in my mouth a lot of times. I put my foot in my mouth like, damn, did I say that? So what I try to do now is I try to, receive the information from the perspective of the other person and see how the information is delivered, received, so on and so forth. So what I do now is I try to think about that prior to saying what I'm saying. So if there's some time where I need to think about my answer, I'm gonna think about the answer because ain't no rush in delivering the wrong answer. Like, if it's wrong, it's wrong. So I think that it's important to at least think about what it is I'm saying before I say it, because I put my foot in my mouth so much, and I'll still put my foot in my mouth, but at least now it ain't every day. It's like once a week.
But you bring up a great point. Sometimes a cooling off period is necessary.
Sometimes
you need to say, you know what, I'm not quite ready to answer that yet. Let me think about it. And then I'll come back to you when I formulated the thought in a way that really conveys what I'm trying to say.
And you might come up with the same thought, like it might be the same. And so that is what you want to say, but there's still a way of saying it.
The last thing you already said to think before you speak. Something else that we practice, we picked this up along the way, is to repeat, to clarify. So did I hear you say what I think you said? So, after the person says what you say, you ask them, so is this what you mean? Or is this what you're trying to say? And get clarification, because sometimes what you hear is not what the person really meant. And so we have to make sure that we're clear about what's said before we respond also.
Yeah, it's important to, that comes from speech 101 or, some type of college class, but it's important to understand what it is being asked of you. That's part of the delegation process. That's all part of management, to be able to take what they say and then throw it back at them. So, this isn't you making it up. This is what they asked you to do, or what they said to you, and then you do it,
Another tool that has helped me is try writing it down first.
That helps.
And read it and say, how does this sound as I'm hearing it in my mind or hearing it out loud? And give yourself an opportunity to edit and say, no, I didn't quite mean it that way. Let me use these words instead. Or sometimes just writing it down gets it out. Now the emotion's gone, and you can throw it away and never even have to address it because you've dealt with the emotion. And so you don't even have to bring it to the other person.
Yeah. A lot of times people don't deal with the emotional side of things, and they wear their emotions on their sleeves, and writing it first and then saying it and reading it.
Process it. Right.
It helps. It does help.
And then the last thing that we had here was to share what you want to say without invalidating the other person's idea or without judging the other person. Just because you feel this way and they feel a different way doesn't make them the bad guy. Doesn't mean that you're right and I'm wrong. Sometimes both people can be right at the same time. Because remember, at the end of the day, it's all about your perspective.
Perspective wins, you guys. Every perspective is different from yours. One of the things I learned this week that a friend of mine said is, he said, just because I light your candle don't mean my flame go out. Like, I thought, wow, that is so profound. Like, candles lighting other candles doesn't mean you lose your flame. And so perspective is everything. And, being grateful, being thankful, being humble, these are all perspectives because somebody woke up without their life today. Somebody passed away. And, communicating that your perspective is yours. Like, it's the way you think, it's the way you see it, is important. It's important, because you have to have good perspective in order to get the things you want out of life.
Right. But just remember, just because that's your perspective doesn't mean everybody has to share it.
Exactly.